Okay. Welcome everybody to Brown Bag History, February 2nd, 2022. Today we're going to be talking about the Tournament of Champions. And as we start, we acknowledge the land traditions and culture of the Secwepemc, the Ktunaxa, the Snyaxt, and the Syilx, the Okanagan Nation Alliance. We acknowledge our use and habitation of this land sacred to these four nations. We respectfully honor their traditions and culture. So the Tournament of Champions, of course, was a really big deal in Revelstoke for many years. And the backstory of that is, ski jumping in Revelstoke really started in 1915, where a lot of the Norwegian families had settled here, and they formed a competitive Revelstoke Ski Club. There'd been ski clubs of one sort or another in Revelstoke as early as 1891, but they really started competitive skiing here when they formed the club in 1914 and had their first winter carnival in 1915. And the first year it was sort of on the base of Mount Revelstoke. Within the next year, they had made an agreement with Parks Canada to build a jump right inside Mount Revelstoke National Park. And that's basically the jump that was in use, obviously with some work over the years. That was the main jump that was used until the 1970s. And of course, there were competitions here. Nels Nelson was the world champion for many years. He was the one that really put Revelstoke on the map in terms of ski jumping. But I'm not talking about that early part of the history. I'm talking about more sort of from the 1949 onward, when they really, after the war, they revitalized the club, rebuilt the jump, and really put Revelstoke on the map in terms of international ski jumping. So just started with this slide to show you, the excitement that was generated by the event and how big that it got. And of course, this is another one of these topics where, I could go on for days talking about it, and we have somebody in the room who could talk about it for days as well. Al Mcginnis is here with us today, and he was very involved with the ski club, and his whole family was for many years. But this is kind of a capsule history, and with a few photographs. So really, in April of 1948, the National Parks Department and the Revelstoke Ski Club rebuilt the big hill, and they renamed it the Nels Nelson Hill to honor Revelstoke's greatest jumper. And when they rebuilt the hill, it made it an official hill, which would meet FIS, or the International Ski Federation specifications. It was classified as an 80-meter jump, which was the largest that the FIS recognized for world competition at that time. So they started the improvements in 1948 and continued them through 49. And then they rebuilt the Judges Tower in November of 1949. But in March of 1949, they held an international invitational ski jumping tournament, which was the first international tournament on the newly rebuilt hill. Mrs. Nels Nelson cut the ribbon to inaugurate the hill. They had 2,500 spectators attending. You can see that they had a note in the paper telling people how to behave and what was going to be available, the official time of the meet. The road was plowed and in good condition. Some sleighs will be available for those not wishing to walk. Those will be stationed at the hospital. They had a coffee and a hot dog stand. Said the jump was in perfect shape. They had special cars, train cars arriving from Vancouver, filled with ski enthusiasts. And one thing that they didn't say here that they did in a lot of the earlier competitions, like in the 1920s and the teens, they would tell people to make sure that their dogs were left at home, and if they did bring their dogs there and they were running onto the hill, that their dogs could be shot. So they obviously, everybody had gotten the message by now, and they didn't have to tell them that by 1949. So they did have a fair number of competitors, came mostly from from Canada. Jack Rucroft was the Vancouver jumper. Noel Paul was from Trail. Petter Hugstead was the Norwegian jumper that attended that year. And Tom Morbraten, who was from Vancouver as well, and Art Johnson, who was that time, I believe he was very involved in the ski club. He was the president for several years and was a noted jumper himself. So Art Johnson did the opening jump at the event. So this is Petter Hugstad, and he was a big deal. It was a big deal getting him here. He was the 1948 Olympic champion, and Carl Gunnarsson later reported his whole family was involved with skiing in Revelstoke, and he said that Petter Hugstad walked onto the hill and stuck his foot in it and said it's too soft. So they got the whole crowd out there to pack the hill. He said there's nothing more dangerous than a soft hill for the landings. So Petter Hugstad, who was the Norwegian champion, won the event that year. He jumped 247 feet, the best that year and a hill record at that point. The 1949 tournament program gave a definition of ski jumping. Said the aim of a ski jumper is combining distance with graceful form, followed by a soft, steady landing. Look for beauty in ski jumping and not for distance only. That year, the Class C boy jumpers were Ernie and Rolly Larson and Alan and John Mcginnis, among others.
That's the longest fall I ever had. My first jump off that beaver.
Was that? So in the fall of 1949, the ski club was wanting to see if they could secure more jumpers from Norway. Just having the one jumper in 1949, it really created a lot of buzz. And they wanted to see if they could get the whole Norwegian ski team. So the president, John Abrahamson, the president of the ski club, wrote to the Norwegian Ski Association, and they got a reply from the manager of the association stating that Norwegian jumping team would be going to Lake Placid and other areas in North America in 1950, and would be glad to come to Revelstoke or other Canadian ski club locations. So they invited the members of the Norwegian team to come, and they estimated that the cost would be over $2,000. So they were going to immediately undertake some fundraising. They decided that the club figured it would take a staff of at least 40 people to put on the meet with several committees. So they immediately struck up the committees. There was a group of people making sure that the hill was prepared and tramped down, and trophy committee. And so lots of work was undertaken to do that. And they decided to hold it as a 2-day show on January 28th and 29th. And you can see from that, those are not the dates that are up on that poster there. So what happened is they went ahead and they planned it. They had everything planned. And then they had to hold an emergency meeting on January 22nd, just a week before the planned event, because there was bad weather systems moving in through North America. And the Norwegians were worried that if they came here before going to Lake Placid, they wouldn't be able to get out and get to Lake Placid. So they said that they wouldn't be able to come. And the local group said, well, if we had it later, could you come? And then they agreed to do that. So they very quickly changed the dates from the end of January to February 11th and 12th. And with just a week's notice, they rescheduled the dances. They had to coordinate with Kelowna, which was supposed to be having a meet that same weekend. So there's a huge amount of work, but they decided that they would go ahead, and they ended up holding the meet. They had a couple of dances scheduled, and I was talking to Alan Mcginnis about this yesterday at Archie Mcginnis and his Scandinavian music. Well, Archie Mcginnis was Scottish through and through, so were wondering exactly what the Scandinavian music.
Oh, his mother was Norwegian.
What's that?
His mother was
Oh, his
Norwegian.
mother was Norwegian. Okay, so he came by it, had some Scandinavian in it too. So he was providing, he was a violinist, was providing the music for the dances. So this was the Norwegian ski team that arrived in Revelstoke in February of 1950. And that really is what started the Tournament of Champions. So at left is Arnfinn Bergman. I'll be talking about him a little bit more. I don't know who the second person is. The third is Petter Hugstad, who had been here the previous year. I don't know who number 4 is. Number 5, I think, is George Thrain. Thrani? Okay. And at the end is Thorbjorn Falkanger. And I'm not sure who the fellows in the front are. But we do have all their names. I was actually trying to match them up by finding pictures of them on the internet, and a few of them I couldn't quite figure out. But Hans Bjorn, one of the other jumpers was Hans Bjornstad, who when they were jumping at Lake Placid, he won the world championship there. Petter Hugstad was the Olympic champion. Thorbjorn Falkanger was a Norwegian champion. Arnfinn Bergman was the Norwegian junior champion. And then the others were members of the team as well. It noted on February 9th, it said that visitors were already arriving from all parts of the interior. And the Vancouver ski train was scheduled to arrive on the morning of February 11th. The newspaper of Revelstoke Review, February 16th, 1950, said that there were 1,500 people watching on Saturday and 3,500 on Sunday. Said they witnessed a display in power and style never before seen in Canada. On the Saturday, the Bjornstad came in first, Trane came in second, and Hugstead came in third. And on the Sunday, it was Bergman was first, Trane was third or second, and Hansen was third. There were also some local jumpers. Art Johnson placed 7th both days. Jack White, who came back to Revelstoke in later years as the CPR superintendent here, came in 9th and 10th, and Tyke Durand came in 10th and 11th. John Mcginnis competed in the E class for boys with an impressive 217.3 points, which was more than any of the boys in C and D classes. Bill Good, who was a well-known CBC sports commentator, gave a running account of on-the-stop jumping on the radio. So it mentioned Arnfinn Bergman, who was in that photograph. He ended up meeting a local woman, Vera Ratcliffe, and they were married for a period of time. And they lived in Revelstoke for a little while, and he was helping to train some of the younger jumpers. There's a picture of him with some of the local boys that he was training. There was Harold Stringer, Bruce Carlson, Tom Renyard, Bill Hollingsworth, Grant Gunnarsson, Graham Bennison, Bobby Bennison, Bev Raven, and John Mcginnis. A couple there that I haven't been able to identify as well. So that is the little kiosk at the CPR station. They had a little kiosk there. In 1951, the newspaper described Bergman as a 23-year-old Scandinavian, as a champion in Norway, thrilled spectators from Lake Placid, New York to Revelstoke when his team was in North America last February. Master of an almost flawless jumping style. And let's look at that picture again. He won awards of 19.5 points out of 20 from 3 of the 5 judges at the second day of jumping last year, and made 2 leaps of 226 feet to beat 6 countrymen and 4 Revelstokians. He won the Olympic jumping competition at the 1952 Winter Olympics in Oslo, Norway. He did end up moving back to Norway and lived the rest of his life out there. Well, in 1951, the Canadian Olympic trials were held in Revelstoke, and they also held a Diamond Jubilee ski jumping tournament. The Revelstoke participants in the Olympic trials were Tyke Durand and Jack White, who placed fifth with a two-day total of 584.8 points. The longest jump, his longest jump was 194 feet. The winner of the competition was Jacques Charland from Thorbjorn Ski Club, and he was followed closely by Lucien Laferte, who was the 1951 Dominion champion. There's Charland and Laferte at the hill. They were both selected for the 1952 Winter Olympics in Oslo, along with John Ray of Princeton and Noel Paul of Kimberley and Ted Hunt of Vancouver. In at the Diamond Jubilee tournament after the Canadian Olympic trials, they had jumpers from the US, Norway, and Canada, of course. A lot of the jumpers would come up from Leavenworth and Wenatchee, Washington as well. In 1952, they held the Western Canada Championships in early March. There's a photograph of people packing down the ski jump, which is a big part of the preparation for the jumping events. In 1953, an international event that was jumpers mostly from BC and Washington and Idaho was won that year by Arne Hole, a Norwegian jumper from the Cascade Ski Club in Wenatchee, Washington. In 1954, Ted Nelson of McCall, Idaho took the top spot with 206.9 points. A man named Thorbjorn Yegaseth, it was a 19-year-old Norwegian cadet who was serving with the RCAF at Penfold, Alberta, said that he electrified a crowd of 2,000 ski fans with leaps of 267 and 249 feet. They said he might have broken the world record jump, but he had a bit of spill on his longer jump. In 1955, they held the Western Canada Nordic Ski Championships, and now Nordic is used to refer to cross country, but then it didn't have the same meaning. So by Nordic they meant more the jumping competitions. The winner was Halvar Selvsback of the Vancouver Ski Club. And the newspaper of that year said, one of the most spectacular jumps of the afternoon was made by John Mcginnis, noted Revelstoke C-class jumper. John came over the B hill in 3 exhibition jumps of 168, 174, and 184 feet. And he was still just a teenager at the time. In 1956, the BC Junior Ski Tournament included cross-country and slalom events. The Oscar Lundell Trophy for the best jump in all classes went to John Mcginnis, and he also won the Ivan Nelson Trophy for best style. An event that they had in 1956, and they did this several years as well, was called the Tournament of Chumps. And it was billed as the only comedy ski event held in North America. There was the local jumpers, club members would put on the Tournament of Jumps. They'd actually do like trick jumping as well. And there was a fair bit of cross-dressing involved in the event as well. Some of the local skiers who were involved in the Tournament of Chumps were Craig Rutherford, Lloyd Bennison, Carl and Gunnar Gunnarsson, and quite a few others as well. In 1957, we have quite a few of the brochures that were produced. I'll have just a few of the covers here. But in 1957, it said it was featuring an entry of 26 top Class A and Class B jumpers, including several Norwegian skiers. They had part of the tournament. They had exhibition hockey and figure skating at Jamboree in the rink on the Friday night. Halvor Nass of Norway was the winner that year, jumping 260 feet on both Saturday and Sunday. In the program that year, they had a little poem called the Skier's Creed. The shout of zigging skis across each frozen slope resounds like clarions that urge me on, enwrapped, completely daft, oblivious of time, content I am to ski and ski and ski. The 1958 Tournament of Champions was the first tournament to be televised, and it was the first truly international tournament. That year they had competitors from Norway, Japan, Germany, Finland, Sweden, and the US, as well as Canada, of course. This was the jumper from Japan, Hiroshi Yoshizawa, arriving for the Tournament of Champions. He had another man from Japan also, another jumper came with him as well. And this is Tony Brucher of Germany, was also a participant in the jump. At the jump that year, Odd Brevik from Norway set a new hill record of 270 feet. And here's Odd Brevik of Norway, Risto Vuorinen of Finland, and Kyotoka Sakai of Japan, who were, I think Sakai was second place and Vuorinen was third. And there they are again with the snow queen that year, Yvonne Kamosi. Yeah, very cute. Later, Yvonne Blake. We had a few pictures there of the 1958 event. This is a picture taken by I think it was a Vernon photographer. You can see the number of people all the way up the hill watching the event, and it's a good shot of the judges' tower there too. That's a picture of a jumper in flight. In the 1959 Tournament of Champions, Finland's Kalevi Karkinen broke the distance record with 278 feet. The paper said he soared through the air at an incredible speed with flawless form, and the gasping spectators knew they had witnessed the ultimate in skiing. There was a note in the Vancouver Sun before the event, said a brilliant sun bathed this railroad settlement today, complementing the carpet of fresh snow, which provides a majestic setting for the 9th annual Revelstoke Winter Carnival and Tournament of Champions. They had a special CPR train that unloaded Vancouver and interior ski enthusiasts. And there were 34 jumpers at the event in 1959. So the hill was groomed by Carl Gunnarsson and Earl Boutwell in perfect shape, drawing high praise from the European jumpers. There's a picture of some of the people working on the hill. Visiting jumpers were introduced to Revelstoke at a special concert held on the Friday night. They had folk songs and dances of each country presented by local entertainers. It said that the highlight of the program came when Japan's personable young jumper, Yasushi Sugiyama, announced through an interpreter that he would like to sing for the crowd. But instead of singing in Japanese, Sugiyama sang an Elvis Presley rendition of Love Me Tender in flawless English. He had spent the entire day memorizing the English words and drew a standing ovation from the surprised crowd. So these are real cultural events in the community as well. They would have people representing the different countries do some of the performances at the welcome event. So they had involved as many local people as possible in that as well. Another picture of the jump. We have lots of photographs from the 1960 event. This was a concession stand that was run by the Women's Auxiliary of the ski club as well. So they had, hot chocolate and coffee and tea and hot dogs available. So in 1960, it was held on March 12th and 13th. A big part of the Tournament of Champions was the crowning of the Winter Carnival Queen. The 1950 Queen was Sylvia Corenti, and so she would preside over the crowning of the new Queen. And in 1950 or 1960, the new Queen was Faye McDonnell, later known as Faye Jones. And another part of the carnival was a lot of groups would do ice sculptures. The Dokies would often do a big tiger. So this was their big tiger that they did. That would be in the parking lot of what's now the Regent parking lot. There's Dr. Hugh Mackay, who was president of the ski club for many years and very involved in the Tournament of Champions with Faye McDonnell, who was crowned the Snow Queen in 1960. And there's Faye with Ray Spearbrecker and Greta Hansen, who became Greta Spearbrecker, and Jack Charland, who mentioned in the previous event had participated from Trois-Rivières, Quebec, and the other fellow there is Franz Baer. And really great photos that came to us from Greta. And this is the 1959 Queen Sylvia Corenti, and then the two of the 1950 contestants with members of the Austrian ski team. And it was an Austrian jumper that won that year, Alvin Planck. And again, John Mcginnis was praised for his performance at the event. Just have a few photographs here of the events. So I didn't have time to do the results of every year, but they continued to have the Tournament of Champions every year through the 1960s, except for 1963 due to a lack of snow. If anybody who was here in 1962 will remember that December 25th of 1962, there was no snow on the ground that Christmas morning. That was one of two white Christmas mornings that we've that are recorded in Revelstoke. And so it was a really low snow year, and they didn't have enough snow to run the tournament in 1963. They replaced the old the Judges Tower in 1961 and continued to have the events. This is Mr. and Mrs. Benison, who were advertising the one of the tournaments one year. And so throughout the 60s, they continued, the ski club worked, just put in tremendous amounts of work to keep the jumping competitions going. They were, and then they would continue to have the ski trains coming up every year. There was even talk of putting in a bid for the 1968 Olympics. In the records that we have of the ski club, there's actually like a 4-page proposal, but they didn't get past that first proposal stage. Then in 1964, they held the Canadian Nordic Championships and the O'Keefe Tournament of Champions in Revelstoke, and this is the poster that they had to advertise it. We actually sell copies of the poster in our gift shop. But they advertised just all the events that were part of it. In that year, they were doing even a judo tournament, as well as the curling, bonspiel, ice skating, and bowling. So it made it a real winter carnival. So I mentioned John Mcginnis a few times. At the and next to this is Lloyd Benison, who's involved with the ski club, and Carrie Lean and John Mcginnis, and I can't remember the other fellow's name right off the top of my head. Howard McDonald, thank you. So at this point, John and Carrie were on their way to the World Championships in Poland. This was in 1961. At the 1964 championship that I just talked about, Carrie Lean had won the Canadian Jumping Championship. But these two jumpers were, two really high class jumpers from Revelstoke. John Mcginnis started skiing at age 7, and by age 9 was jumping on the B hill. They started jumping on the Hans Gunnarsson jump, which is also known as the Big Bend jump, just a little bit west around the slope of the mountain. John, of course, went on to become a member of the Canadian ski jumping team for 12 years, competing in Europe and North America, and as well as at Revelstoke, of course. He went to Poland to compete in the 1962 World Championships, and then was in Innsbruck for the 1964 Olympics in sorry, I got my notes mixed up. Did the 1962 World Championship, and then he went to Innsbruck for the 1964 Olympics, and then in Oslo for the 1966 World Championships. And I believe he also completed in the 1968 Olympics. And they talked about his incredible form, and you can really see it there. We have a pair of John's skis here, as well as the Hudson's Bay jacket and hat that were part of the one of the uniforms for one of the two Olympics that he was at. John talked about the training and coaching and support that the Europeans and Scandinavians had compared to what they had here. He said we'd go to a competition in Europe, and it would be the first time we put our skis on for the season. For the Europeans, that might be their hundredth or thousandth jump for the season. There was just no comparison. And then, of course, to jump here, you had to walk up the hill with your skis as well. So it's a little harder to be at the same level as the other international jumpers. In 1969, John Mcginnis won the North American Championship in Quebec. And John's brother Alan, who's here with us today, was very involved in the Revelstoke Ski Club and coached the junior jumpers, was a hill captain for several years, and 13 years, and can tell us in great detail about the work involved in preparing the hill. It's just a tremendous amount of work. He said it would usually take about 3 weeks of preparation before a tournament. And then it would snow and you'd have to do it all over again, right? So in 1969, downhill skiing, because they had downhill runs on Mount Revelstoke as well. And they stopped doing downhill on Mount Revelstoke in 1969 and moved all the downhill skiing to Mount Mackenzie, which had been in operation since 1963. The jumping tournaments continued, although they were fewer and farther between. The last large jumping tournament was the Western Canadian Ski Jumping Tournament in February of 1974, and the Canadian Junior and Senior Ski Jumping Championship and the International Cross Country Championship in March of 1974. The Canadian jumping team was present, and jumpers came from all over Canada to that one. In 1975, there was a small junior jumping tournament, and that was the last jump. That was the last competitive jump on the hill. A lot of people ask about, why jumping stopped, and there's really a combination of reasons. One of them is that jumping was no longer as popular as it had been. So younger skiers were getting more into downhill skiing than they were into jumping. And there's just a tremendous amount of work involved. The young jumpers were having to prepare the hill as well as jump on it. So it kind of took away from the fun of it when they were having to put a lot of work just into prepping the hill. And then, of course, the jump is in a national park, and Parks Canada was no longer providing the help that they used to do in the early days in terms of grooming the hill, and weren't as keen to have the jumping continue, and weren't really keen on doing any of the work that would have been required to bring the jumps back up to international standards. So there was a combination of reasons, but that's why it finally ended. So I'm ending with this photograph of Art Johnson, who was one of the local ski jumpers back from the early days. And also wanted to note that I believe it's off limits now just because of avalanche risk, but the Parks Canada has done a really good job of interpreting the history of the ski jump on Mount Revelstoke. They've created a really nice interpretive area, and right at the area where the jumpers would start, they've created a bronze sculpture, which is the torso of a jumper, and it's on an angle there. You can walk in with your skis and lean over as if you were leaning out over the jump, and really gives you a feeling for what the jumpers would have gone through at that time. So thanks for this. As I say, there's way more that we could talk about on this, but we'll leave it at that for now. And our next talk on February 16th, I'm going to talk specifically about Isabel Corsier, who was the women's world champion back in the 1920s, and she made that record exactly 100 years ago this year. So I wanted to talk about her a bit more. So thank you for joining us today, and we'll just close. Thank you to my online audience.